Hi Flosstube, it's Helen D. I am back with another tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to make what's called a Pendibule ornament. I made a few of these at Christmas time, and people called them origami ornaments because they're kind of folded up and they may look tricky, but they really are not. This is a no sewing machine required finish. I'm going to get started and then I'll talk to you about the design and stuff so that while I'm stitching you don't have to just watch me stitch. So this piece here, like I said, I'll talk to you about in a bit. I stitched that at Christmas. I've just finished this one. It's called, I think it's like Crow Halloween Pendibule by Doreen Jones on her Etsy store. So when you stitch a pendibule, the ornament, it's a square. I think it's 65 by 65, it's a perfect square. So it's kind of like assembling a biscornu or a mattress finish where you're stitching it together through this back stitch line. So you stitch your design and then you stitch a line of back stitch, one stitch out, and the design calls for this. The chart will call for that line of back stitch all the way around. I did mine in 2 strands, which is what it called for. So now we just have to kind of fold it and stitch it up. So this one I've ironed it. I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch from all 4 sides. And I'm not going to use interfacing. I'm going to cut a smidge more than a 1/4 inch. The beads are making it a little tricky, and I don't want to cut it too small. And if they're not exact, it's not going to matter because we're going by this line. We just don't want a ton of extra fabric in our way when we're sewing things up. Now the reason that I'm not using an interfacing, normally when I do an ornament I will use an interfacing. Normally when I do an ornament, oh, I don't have a trash can. Normally when I do an ornament, I like to stuff my ornaments very, very full. These I don't stuff nearly as full, and to me the interfacing is there to protect the stitches when I'm shoving polyfill in there. With this, because you need to bend the edges, you really only put a little stuffing in the middle for it to hold its shape. And when you're stitching, if you wanted to use an interfacing, you'd have to get it so that it does not cover this line of backstitch, because then you're trying to sew through the interfacing and it would just make it really difficult. So we have this cut out. I don't know if this is good for contrast or not. So here's my piece. I have just some matching fabric from whatever I stitched my line in. In my case it's 310. I'm going to take one long strip and end up doing a loop start. So I'll thread my needle. Okay, so that's ready. So we're going to fold this in half like a triangle and kind of match up our stitches here on the end where you have one on each side. You have to kind of fold this little flap in to really get to them. I'm going to tell you, the edges are the hardest part. Sometimes they look a little not great, then you cover them up. So it doesn't, don't let that worry you, because it's thick. There's a lot going on the edge. So I've just pinched in as much as I can of that extra fabric. I don't really want to cut any off because I'm afraid then I'll cut too much off. So I'm going to just pick one of the sides, doesn't really matter which side, and go This is going to be hard to show you guys. Go right down this line in that back stitch, go right under it, and then pull it through, but not all the way, just enough. So then on the other side I can go up in that first back stitch and come up through my loop and pull that through. So that will secure my thread on there. So then you kind of manhandle them down a little bit. So that just the back stitch lines are showing as much. Again, there's a lot of extra here. I might cut a little of that off. I'm just going to kind of snip some of this extra point off and see if that helps. Once you get going, you'll whip through it, but the first few, there, that will help. That will be a little extra, less fabric I have to work with. So then you're just going to go in the next line of backstitch. In the first few you kind of have to do, I found, one side at a time. So I went in one and I'm kind of coming up through this side. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to get a couple on there. And then see if I can neaten it up a little. This is hard to do in an angle that hopefully you can see. So, like I said, it's a little bumpy, a little lumpy, but you're going to cover that up. So then once you get going, or after a few stitches, usually, if the fabric is cooperating with you, you can get it lined up so that you can go right through one and then right over through the other one. I'm still not there. There we go. I felt it pull a little tighter on that one. So I'm just trying to finger press this down there enough. I really want just that line of backstitch at the top. Because we have to do this all the way around. It's a little time consuming, but it's not difficult. Now, once you get it kind of flowing, it's a little quicker. So now, like I said, you can see I've made it through my bumpy, messy part. So now hopefully I can kind of whip through. So as I'm doing this, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about this particular design. So like I said, this one is by Doreen Jones. She has a number of charts on her Etsy store that are what she considers a three-dimensional. She has them listed as 3D charts because they're different shapes. I think she has some round ones and she has different things, but she has several different pendibules. She has several Santas, some snowmen, 2 or 3 of these different monochromatic Halloween that you could do. I think she shows some done on black with an orange floss, on orange with a black floss. I went with 25 count vintage country mocha because specifically I wanted mine to be a little bigger. This one is on a 16 count Aida. Because you completely can do these on Aida, that's not a problem. If you have a stiff Aida, it might be difficult, this sewing together part, because it will be hard to kind of get that fabric out of your way. When I did the Santas, I did 2 on an even weave, on a Lugana, and this one on an Aida. And the one on the Aida was definitely just a little fussier. It wasn't difficult, it was just fussier. And it's a picture of this plus Aida, so it was super soft. but it's a little thicker of a fabric. So Doreen also has several spring designs with flowers and bees. So she has lots of them if you want to check them out. So I'm going to pause this so that you don't have to just watch me go around this entire thing. The ornament, this one calls for some beads down on the end. Like when you get to this part, you could attach some beads to hang them down. I'm not going to bother. So I'm just going to follow this line right around. Once you get down to the point, I'll come back on when we get down to the point and show you that it just follow the line and it goes right up. So I'm going to stitch down to this point and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm getting close to this end. I have to tell you, this went a lot quicker when I was off camera and was able to hold it closer to my face. Seeing that tone on tone is difficult. So I'm going to show you a couple things. Before I get to the end, I could go a ways longer on my thread, but I'm at a good spot to kind of end it and start a new one. There's no way I can do the rest of it with this. So while this is still open, I'm just going to go kind of inside. Easier said than done. I'm going to kind of poke through one of these little salvage pieces, seams. Just poke through the other side to the inside and kind of end it just like you would any other thread, where I'm going to go under a couple stitches. And I might do that a couple times just to kind of get it good and tied off on the inside. And then snip that off. And I will start a new thread while I have my snips out. I'm also going to take off, like, see how this is kind of, it frays a little, so I don't want to cut off too much too early, but I'm just going to trim off a little bit of each of these corners to take some of that excess fabric out of there. So I'll re-thread up here. Now, I also noticed I got a little off and I wasn't quite lining up. Like as I was going, I would kind of check at the bottom to see if they were lining up. And you can tell even now I'm a little off. This side is a little off. It's probably like one stitch off. So what I did a couple times is when I went kind of through one stitch and then the other stitch, I'm gonna anchor this one. Then I went through another stitch on this side, but went back through that same stitch on the other side so that I could kind of tighten it up a little bit and pull them a little closer together. And you can't tell on the edge where I've done that. So we're down here at the corner. Again, the corners are the tricky parts. So we're just going to kind of keep coming through. Had it all pinched how I liked it. Keep coming through on each side, right up to the corner, and then maneuver that extra fabric in there, which is the tricky part. I'm still one stitch over, but it will all work out on the end. It's not a perfect square. Like it doesn't need to be like a mattress finish, right? Like one of the Hands-On Designs blocks. If you're off a stitch, just go back one. Once it's all folded up, no one will know. Get rid of these. So I just need to kind of squish these in there as best as I can so that I can keep going. And these stitches will probably just be a little slower too to kind of get right. Squish too much of that one in. To get right around the edge. Hope you guys can see this. The camera angle is weird on this one. Fold these big chunks in. I'm just going to do a few stitches one side at a time to really get it in there as best I can. And then I'll get back into my rhythm. I was able, when it was closer to my face, to do it so that I could fold it and then go straight through one side to the other. Once you get through this thick stuff, it was a little easier. So once we're done this corner, which we're just about around, we're going to end up stitching about I'll stitch like a third of the way up this side, which I'll turn off to do. So I'm going to end up stitching about a third of the way up, and then we'll stuff. So I'll be back. All right, I made it up about halfway, maybe a little more, a third, not quite half. Made it up the side. So now I'm ready to stuff. I'm just going to take my needle off so it won't be in the way. I'm just using polyfill. I like Mountain Mist. That's the brand that I tend to use, but use whichever one you prefer. And just like some of my pillow finishes, I like to put just a little bit of yarn down in the bottom so that way I think it holds its shape a little better. I finally finished my big, if you've seen other videos, I had that giant yarn I had to separate. I finally finished that. So I just cut a few little strips, I don't know, 4 or 6 inch strips of yarn, and I'm just going to wad them up and kind of just tuck them right in, that bottom tip. So when you stuff your Pendibule, you only really stuff the middle, and then the arms are empty because that's what we fold up. So I'm just going to take not nearly as much as I normally would use to stuff this up. And I'm doing it kind of gentle because I didn't use interfacing and I don't want to snag anything now after we've just sewn it all. So I'm going to stuff this in there. And I'm kind of getting it like over to the edge, and I'll practice a few times. Like, all right, well, there's where I want my bend to be. You know, to make sure that I've got enough in there, but not too much. Let's see. So we've kind of, it's squishy, but once we get to the edges, they will still be able to bend and reach. That actually might be a smidge much. Because one of my edges, they weren't connecting easy enough. That's how I could kind of tell. So I want to just bend them over so they'll be able to go together. So that's it. Like I said, I'm not going to overstuff. I'm just kind of going to kind of lightly stuff. Get that corner before we get going. And then sew up. And I might just hang here with you guys. You can fast forward to the end if this is too boring for you to see how we connect the edges. So yeah, it's just really a whip stitch. The hands-on design blocks are done the same way, the same kind of stitch. There's a little different because there's a top and a bottom. But it's just a basic, it's time consuming, but it's not difficult. And honestly, I'm using a regular needle. A sharper needle would probably be easier, but I was afraid I'd poke myself too many times, to be honest. I really enjoy doing these kind of different shaped finishes because they're a little different and they look impressive without really being tricky. Just because they're different, right? Like if you went to a smalls exchange and you gave someone a Pendibule, it would turn a lot of heads because it's a different finish that people might not have seen before and might not know how to do, and might be something that they want to try for themselves. So this end piece is going to be equally as difficult as the one we started with by the time we get up there. And I'm hoping I have enough floss and I don't need to. I should have probably started a new one, but I didn't, so now I have to deal with it because it's going to be a little tight, I think. I'm hoping you can see this. Like I said, I really need to be able to hold it a little closer to my face so that I can see it. But I don't want my big old head with my gray hairs to be blocking you guys. I have seen some of these in other places, like not just on Doreen's Etsy store. Actually, I'll have to see if I can find it. I think I saw one of her designs in one of her Pendibules in one of the Just Cross Stitch Christmas ornament issues. So if you have that, that would be a great one to try. I think I had a reindeer on it, now that I'm thinking of it. So I'll have to see. It would be one of the more recent ones. All right, we're almost there. So's my thread. That is like a fraction of the fiber fill that I normally use. It always feels so weird when I'm stuffing something lightly, because that's not my usual MO. So this edge is going to be just as difficult as the others, where we just kind of manipulate, and it's starting to come loose a little, so I'm going to do the best I can. And like I said, if it's a little messy, I'm going to cover it up. So don't think, oh my gosh, I got all the way to the end and now my edge is really messy. And I'm going to end up doing one stitch at a time through here to really get that stuff in. And if it's really messy, use a wider ribbon. No one will know. Oops, lost my thread. I am going to make it on my thread at least. These two started off the same length. All right. So I'm going to have to like gently, if you had a chopstick or something, just poke some of this extra in there. I don't want to unravel anymore, but Just try and poke that in there as best I can. Keep going around. This side's going to be even messier than the first one. See, I'll just prove to you that if it's messy, it won't matter in the end. So we get up here to the last ones. Some of mine kind of got squished in there, so I'll do the best I can. Okay. Then the fun part. Then the origami comes in with my smidge of, my just enough of floss here. Okay. So we take our two edges, and you're just going to bring them together on the top and just sew them together. So I'm kind of just going to take a bite out of one side and connect it over here. And just sew them together. You know, just take a few stitches to get these sides together. So there's one, and I'm just 2 or 3. It doesn't take a ton. It's thick. This is the thick section. Okay, and then I will just kind of put my needle in one side, come up through the loop and do a little knot, tie it off, and I might just go back one more stitch. That's some thread chicken with you guys. So I'm going to cut that off. It's sticking out a little. Again, we're gonna cover that up. So now you can kind of use your hands to just fluff it around a little bit how you want it. Get the folds, you know, kind of how you want them, how you want the front to look. And then I grabbed just a piece of rayon ribbon that I'm just going to tie a knot on one end. Not very well. I think my ribbon needs to be a smidge longer. Whew. Hold up. Alright, tie your ribbon a little longer. Cut your ribbon a little longer and you won't have this problem. I'll have to make myself a longer ribbon. So, tie a little knot in your ribbon and then just wrap it around and pull it through the loop. And that loop will cover all your problem areas, and then you'll have a nice hanger. Again, I'm gonna recut my ribbon so it's a little longer. But there you go. So then you can kind of shape it how you want it, and that is your Pendibule. Now, size comparison. This one, like I said, was 25 count because I wanted it larger. This one is 16 count and I used cording, which tied very nicely. I may actually make cording for this one. I like my Christmas tree ornaments a little smaller, so for the Christmas tree this size was fine. But this one, I have a hanger that I put some Halloween ornaments on and I wanted it a little larger. So there's the size difference between, oops, sorry, this way. A 16 and a 25. So there you go. I hope that you were able to see what I was doing. It's really just sewing up those sides and then just tying them together at the top. So it looks like origami, but it's really simple to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed and stitch all the Pendibules.